Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Russell's Movie Reviews, and welcome back to the first annual Halloween special. I know these episodes are going to be a few days late. I know they were supposed to come out on Saturday, um, or I was supposed to film them on Saturday, but I was at my, um, over the last few days, I've been having some family stuff that's been happening, so I've been obviously attending that stuff, which kind of led me away from doing the movie reviews. So that's why these two episodes, I should say, are coming out on a Monday instead of Saturday. Um, and welcome to another double header where basically I'm gonna be doing two reviews on the exact same day. Kind of like last week I did Ghostbusters 1 and 2. This week I'm gonna be doing the first two films of a franchise that's from the 1930s that you guys may know of. Of course, I'm going to be talking about the first two Frankenstein movies. Obviously, we're going to be talking about first Frankenstein. And expect the Bride of Frankenstein review coming up a little while after um, the Frankenstein review. But first, let's talk about Frankenstein. This was released on November 21st of 1971, 1931, directed by James Whale, and had a budget of $291,000, which is basically nothing. That seems more like an indie film, but granted, this was 1931, where they couldn't pour $1 million into a film. Um, so yeah, this had a budget of $291,000, and domestically made over 12 million. Which again doesn't seem like that much, but for 1931 with a basically a $3,000 budget, it's successful. And worldwide it hasn't been confirmed yet, which I don't think it was released worldwide, even though there's kind of some English actors in this film that are not exactly American. Same goes for Bride of Frankenstein. Um, and this was directed by James Whale, which I think I already said earlier, but he directed not only this but also Bride of Frankenstein. Um, so the plot for Frankenstein is that the obsessed scientist Dr. Henry Frankenstein, played by Colin Clive, as his, as his, as he attempts to create life by assembling a creature from body parts of the dead. Aided by his loyal hunchback assistant Fritz, played by Dwight Fry, Frankenstein succeeds in animating his monster, played by Boris Karloff. But, confused and traumatized, he escapes into the countryside and begins to wreak havoc. Frankenstein searches for the elusive being and eventually must confront his tormented creation. Now, this is a classic story that everyone has heard of, which I actually do have the book. I think it's in one of my, uh, in the garage, in my garage. So I couldn't pull it out for this review. But yeah, obviously Frankenstein is based off of a book played by Mary Shelley. Um, and there are some deviations from the book. Like you guys may have heard, I said Henry Frankenstein and not Victor Frankenstein. Um, which I actually do have a fun fact about the whole name changing thing. Um, but it's weird that the Frankenstein's first name is Henry, even though it was Victor in the book, and Frankenstein's friend, Henry Mortis, is now Victor in the 1931 version. Um, so it's just kind of a little weird that they decided to change the name for the film. But in future adaptations, like Hammer's Curse of Frankenstein, they changed the name back to Victor Frankenstein. Which I will be actually want to talk about um, the Hammer, Frankenstein, and Dracula movies in a future installment of the Halloween annual series. Um, um, but you gotta get them all first because I obviously don't have The only Hammer Dracula film, actually the only Hammer film that I have, is Dracula Prince of Darkness by Screen Factory. So I'm gonna have to still get all of them. But we're not gonna be talking about Dracula right now. We're talking about the 1931 version of Frankenstein, which isn't, which was also kind of ironic because Dracula was also released in 1931. There was a 1931 version of Dracula released by Universal that starred Bela Lugosi as the title. Um, which film do I think is better? I'm not exact. I don't really have an opinion on that because I never seen Dracula 1931. I've only seen Frankenstein. Um, but for what I've seen of Frankenstein, it's a pretty good film. Um, and yeah. So anyway, let's talk about the cast. Um, we have Colin Clive, as I said before, as Henry Frankenstein, or I mean, in the context of the movie, of not only this but also Bride of Frankenstein, he's called Henry Frankenstein. But in the book, as I already said, his first name is Victor. Um, so really, you could call him whatever you want, as long as the last name is Frankenstein. But um, in the context of the movies, his name is Henry Frankenstein. It won't be until I believe, like obviously in future adaptations of the book, they would change his name obviously to Victor Frankenstein. And like I said, with the Curse of Frankenstein from I believe 1957, which again I will be talking about hopefully in a future episode of this series of the Halloween annual special. We have Mae Clark as Elizabeth Lavenzie. I'm really sorry if I butchered that last name, but yeah, she plays basically Frankenstein's wife. Um, and um, I think she does fine with the role. Um, we have the fantastic Boris Karloff as the monster, which, if you obviously have seen Frankenstein, you know that in the initial first credits of the film, it doesn't show um, it doesn't show that the monster is played by anyone. It's just a question mark. But in the end credits, it says Boris Karloff. Um, but I think this is like one of the only actors that can pull off a role by saying nothing, and that's showing like some credibility to the actor of Boris Karloff. And obviously he will return for Bride of Frankenstein and Son of Frankenstein, which I unfortunately don't have, which I will actually want to cover, I believe, in a future Halloween special. I just gotta find the movie. I don't think it was released individually on Blu-ray. I know it was definitely released in a box set on Blu-ray. Um, but next we have Dwight Fry as Fritz, who's Frankenstein's assistant. Um, apparently Dwight Fry is a mainstay in Universal monster movies because um, right before they did Dracula, he appeared in or right before they did Frankenstein, he appeared in Dracula as um, what's his Renfield. That's what his name is. He played Renfield in Dracula, and then after this, he'll play a role in Bride of Frankenstein, which I'll get to, and then um, he would just have like basically small cameo roles in future Frankenstein movies. And I believe in the Dracula sequel, actually, was there a sequel to Dracula per se? I don't think there was, but anyway. Um, yeah, he does a great job as Fritz. His Frankenstein's hunchback assistant. Um, but Yeah, it just seems he just seems a little bit uncanny. It seems like like Frankenstein later just pulled him from a insane asylum, which could have been a part of the original. Um, I don't know. It just seems a little weird. Or like his performance um as Fritz. Granted, he did just play um Renfield in Dracula, which is kind of a crazy character in itself. So maybe it was kind of just going off of that. We have Edward Van Sloan as Dr. Waldman, who played in Dracula. He also appeared as Dr. Van Helsing. The two performances, I could tell they're really similar. I've seen footage, I've seen scenes um from Dracula, and the performance between Dracula and then obviously Frankenstein, it just seems so similar. Um, which one I think pulled the better performance? I don't really know because, like I said, they basically pulled off the exact. He did basically the exact same role for both characters. But if I have to, I guess, um, if I had to pick one, I'd probably guess Dr. Waldman, even though Dr. Waldman is killed off in Frankenstein, even though Van Helsing is kind of like the hero of the film. Um, we have Frederick Kerr as Baron Frankenstein, who is basically Henry's father. Who is basically like telling like Henry saying like you got to get married like or else you know like I, I I don't really know why his father is like demanding him to get married. Maybe it was just like a custom back in the 30s or whenever this book came out. I have no idea. Um, but yeah, and then finally we have John Bullis as Victor Maltz as uh, which like I said earlier, his name in the book was Henry. Um, but in the 1931 version of Frankenstein, his name is changed to Victor. Obviously, to switch it out with Henry, with Frankenstein. Sorry. Um, he does fine with the role. He doesn't really appear in that many scenes. Um, but he seems okay, and he doesn't appear um in the sequel, which uh but really quickly before I get to favorite scenes and the fun facts and then my rating and stuff like that, I want to really talk about this steelbook that I have. This was the Best Buy exclusive steelbook that they had for all their classic monsters, which was because I think when these came out, there was like a new collection that came out, so they decided to release uh all the main film all the films in the collection separately on steelbook form. So we obviously have Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein on this kind of steelbook. We also had Dracula, the Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Jesus. Um, and I think like one or two other films, but really for me, I had to go with the Frankenstein films. Even though I really want to get Dracula and the Wolfman. Um, but I'll go over the Frankenstein one for this review, and obviously with the Bride of Frankenstein, I'll go over that release. But this is uh, the front cover. Um, oh, the spine and the back. And what's really cool about this is that it just comes off. So really, this part where it actually tells you what the movie is just like it's just plastic. And then because obviously there's no name on here, but it's a very smooth steelbook, and obviously there's the name on the back, and then there's the disc, and Take this out so you guys could see the full inside. Trying to get not get that much glare. Um, but yeah, and then you can see back here like all the films that were released previously on Blu-ray separately. Um, so I guess you would also would have gone, like so you got Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, the Invisible Man, the Bride of Frankenstein, the Wolf Man, um, Phantom of the Opera, and then Creature from the Black Lagoon. So those were all, I believe, all of those got steelbook releases like this. Um, and the the cover design for both this and Bride of Frankenstein and like all the steelbooks that came out were done by Alex Ross, and they are fantastic. Um, but anyway, favorite scenes? Honestly, um, when the most iconic scene I think from Frankenstein is when the monster starts moving his hand like upwards, and Frankenstein just goes off saying like it's alive, and then he says, "In the name of God, and now I know it feels like to be God." Um, and actually, I guess my first fun fact, even though it isn't on here, is that this movie was censored for really stupid stuff, like the God line in the censored version was actually censored, and like obviously I can't pull up footage of it because this is the uncut version with like all the stuff put back in. But what what the cuts were was basic, or what the censored stuff was is that basically when he like right before he says the God line, they put like a thunderbolt, and it's like they basically drown out his whole like the whole line. But you can still see his mouth moving, so it's like okay, well that he clearly said something, but they censored it. Um, I think another scene when they tranquilize the monster. Um, there's a shot of like the needle going into the back of the monster. They cut that scene because they thought it was too violent, and yet it was important to the scene because I had a tranquilizer, and then the monster falls and like is knocked out. So in the censor version, it just seems like he just like feels a little woozy and it just falls down for no reason. Like what the Frankenstein hit him a little bit too hard. Um, and then yeah, and then so I think Universal put out like the restored version on VHS as a part of like the Universal Monsters Classic Collection, but the God line for some reason was not fixed. Um, which I think if you get that version, it's the only like real, unless you still get VHS or like not get VHS. I think that's the only version now that's readily available to hear the God line censored. Because everything else in that movie, in that version of Frankenstein, is basically like this, like the Blu-ray version, but except for the God line, and obviously it's the Blu-ray has been digitally remastered. Um, but yeah, those are really like the only changes I can really think about right now. If you want to know more about the changes to the movie version, or like the 1931 version of Frankenstein, I recommend going to this is not a promotion or anything, but I'm just saying go to cinemassacre.com and look up their Frankenstein review, and they go more kind of into depth about the changes that were done to this film. So go and check out that review if you want to learn about more about how like why they did the changes or what changes they did. Um, And I guess fun fact number two, even though it was the only one I written down on my paper here, is that the reason why Frankenstein's first name was changed from Victor to Henry was because the filmmakers decided that Victor sounded too severe or and unfriendly to American audiences at the time. Yeah, so the whole name changing thing about the whole Frankenstein's first name being changed from Victor to Henry was because that they thought that it would sound basically too scary for, or they sound like too menacing for audiences back in 1931, which is honestly now like a pretty stupid reason why they changed a name for a movie. But I guess history was made with this film, and it's become one of the most renowned horror flicks ever made. I mean, because would you really count this as a horror movie? Because on Google, it's classified as a horror slash sci-fi film. Um, so I don't really know if you would count this as a horror film, but I guess now it technically is. Um, but like this established like what you need to do for a horror film. Um, and I still think it's a good movie, just not as good as most people say it is. And I actually think that the sequel, Bride of Frankenstein, is actually a little bit better than the first film itself. But that's for next time. Um, but yeah. And really quickly before I get to the rating, I just want to talk about the score. It was done by Bernard Karn, I believe that's how you say it. Um, the music for this film is absolutely iconic for Universal monster standards. Um, and I just think that you know this, the movie along with the score is iconic in every shape or form. And I really do recommend. I do recommend watching this film if you could find it. Don't don't really try and find the steelbook. I just say go for the regular Blu-ray because they're basically, I believe, both the exact same discs. So unless you want to, have a more pleasing looking cover, then by all means go and get the steelbook. But if you just want to go and watch Frankenstein, go for the regular Blu-ray release and don't try and hunt this down because this is probably worth, like, this is probably a little bit rare now because obviously um, they don't. I don't think they really make it anymore. But yeah. So this, I would give this film a 7 out of 10. It's a good monster flick. And obviously um, it did kind of set the ground for what to do with monster flicks. Um, but I think obviously some of the sequels, with Bride of Frankenstein and Son of Frankenstein, I think they do it a lot better. Um, but then after Son of Frankenstein, I think they start going a little bit downhill until Albert and Albert and gets um Albert and Costello, like the comedy film that they did with Frankenstein, the Wolfman, and Dracula. That's when it really hits like the lowest point, and I'm just like, okay, this is the comedy show now, basically. But stay tuned for later on today, where I'm gonna be reviewing Bride of Frankenstein, which I think is a little bit better than this initial film. But anyway, guys, hope you guys enjoy, and stay tuned for the Bride of Frankenstein review. Live long and prosper. Out.